We're getting 10,000 migrants a month. This is going to come to a neighborhood near you. But we're here. We're here. We're getting no support on this national crisis, and we're receiving no support. And let me tell you something, I don't see an ending to this. I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City. Destroy New York City.
New York City is in crisis because of all the problems that's been going on. We're gonna be highlighting the migrant issue that our mayor, Eric Adams, is dealing with. Mayor Eric Adams played the role of a welcoming host, opening his doors and telling everyone to come in. The more the merrier.
As the mayor of the city of New York, I don't, weigh into immigration issues, border issues. I have to provide services for families that are here, and that's what we're going to do. And that's what our responsibility as a city. I'm proud that this is a right to shelter state, and we're going to continue to do that. And New York is a city that has always represented the democratic values and the values of our city, of showing our compassion, and that's what we're doing today.
But now, fast forward, just in a few months, we see the chaotic mess that we're dealing with. New York City is in chaos right now. We're going to be talking about the long history of how we got to this point. What is New York City doing? What is the city doing? Why things are so chaotic? There's a lot of people who are angry. No one is doing well in this situation. We are all suffering, whether you are a migrant coming in or you live in New York City and you're suffering with the housing crisis. We have migrants coming into the most expensive place to live in the world. Why? We're gonna be talking about that and more. Let's get into it. So, as a migrant, I'm sure you imagine New York City as this amazing place that everyone talks about. Tons of movies about it, songs. New York City is one of the most famous places in the world. And you have someone, only a few years ago, Mayor Eric Adams, playing the role of a welcoming host, telling people to come on in, the more the merrier. But the problem is, if you invite all these people to your house, eventually your fridge will probably start getting empty. You realize your wallet isn't bottomless, and your house is not necessarily a place that can stretch like elastic. Now the whole vibe is shifting from everyone come in and we're gonna take care of you to this logistical nightmare, figuring out who gets some money, who gets some support. Because right now, we have people that live in New York City suffering as more people come in. Let's talk about how this all started. Just 2 years ago, what did Eric Adams talk about when it came to sanctuary cities and migrants coming through? What did he say? He highlighted the New York City's sanctuary city status during his 2021 campaign, emphasizing support for undocumented migrants as essential members of the community. We go from there to March of 2022. The Department of Homeland Security began releasing large numbers of migrants apprehended at the southwest border into small bordering adjacent towns, leading to logistical challenges for these communities. Everyone saw this, especially if you've been following the news, and even if you are a mayor of New York City, you need to know what's going on in the entire country. So this is something that I'm sure he had some idea of what's going on. April of 2022, Texas Governor Greg Abbott initiated the buses of migrants to other cities, including Washington, D.C., to alleviate pressure on Texas towns. So this is where things got tricky.
Driven by bus and fueled by politics, another wave of migrants arrived in New York City today.
Merecemos una oportunidad.
More than 4,000 have come since May, a metaphorical message from Texas Governor Greg Abbott. New York's mayor is furious, saying shelters are already overrun.
Placing on the bus with no direction to come here.
But tonight, Abbott is adamant border states are done shouldering America's immigration crisis after May saw a record 239,000 illegal crossings. The governor slammed President Biden Friday for refusing to do his job and called New York a sanctuary city, the ideal destination for migrants.
As much as Eric Adams did not appreciate all of the new migrants coming in, the problem is New York City is a sanctuary state. So from July 2022 to August 2023, Mayor Eric Adams requested federal assistance to manage the influx of asylum seekers, putting a lot of stress on the New York City's right to shelter obligations. The city faced challenges accommodating the growing number of migrants. Now, we're talking about September of last year, the crisis has escalated, with the Mayor Adams warning the migrant situation could potentially destroy New York City.
Started with a madman down in Texas decided he wanted to bus people up to New York City. 110,000 migrants. We have to feed, clothe, house, educate the children, wash their laundry sheets, give them everything they need, health care. And this team here, we stated, let's do everything possible before we have to push it out into neighborhoods and communities. Month after month, I stood up and I said, this is going to come to a neighborhood near you. Well, we're here. We're getting no support on this national crisis, and we're receiving no support. And let me tell you something, New Yorkers. Never in my life have I had a problem that I did not see an ending to. I don't see an ending to this. I don't see an ending to this. This issue will destroy New York City. Destroy New York City.
Highlighting the city's struggle to provide adequate resources and shelter to the influx of migrants. So this is where things get really, really terrible for us in New York City. So what Eric Adams is trying to do, he's trying to strike a balance, trying to set some ground rules, trying to suggest who should stay, who should go. It's a delicate dance, and right now, no one is happy. New York City is facing a migrant crisis, with shelters and temporary housing being overwhelmed due to the influx of migrants, leading to really sad overcrowding conditions and a lack of resources. New York City being a sanctuary city, which the law has been set back since the 80s, so it's not something new, it's been around for quite some time. New York City trying to manage the crisis by creating tent cities and providing temporary housing. But the problem is with the whole tent city situation is that we do not live in California. The weather gets really cold. It gets extremely cold in New York City. We get the worst of all the seasons. We get it really, really hot or really, really cold. So this is what New York City is struggling. They're struggling with the high costs of just living and the logistical challenges. And let's talk about the migrants, their expectations. Many migrants having to endure harsh conditions on their journey are expecting better accommodations and unwilling to stay in some of these makeshift shelters.
The opening of the new migrant shelter at Floyd Bennett Field in Brooklyn did not go as smoothly as some officials had hoped.
Several migrant families that were bused to the facility refused to stay there.
Clearly, the situation is not ideal here. It's a transit desert. It is far from everything. It's not close to where parents have to take their kids to school. The bathrooms, the showers are outside. A long list of concerns.
State Assembly member Jamie Williams was on site and echoed those concerns.
It's a very isolated area. When you came in, you have to come all around. So it's not a place where you put women and children, and then the facilities is just not, friendly, especially in the middle of the night if a child or an adult have to get up to go outside of the tent to use that.
And that's leading to a lot of tension between the migrants and the people who are trying to take care of them. This situation sparks a lot of debate over the city's obligations, the migrants' expectations, and the broader challenges of handling this large-scale migration in New York City. In New York City, homelessness, unemployment, and poverty rates are significant concerns without even considering the impact of migrants being here. As of October 2023, the city's main shelter system was housing a total of about 90,000 homeless people. This figure includes the 21,000 homeless families, 32,000 homeless children, and 23,000 homeless single adults. This situation is further complicated by the city housing and employment challenges, where many New Yorkers facing high living costs and limited job opportunities. The state of New York has seen notable increase in homelessness, with more than 81,000 individuals seeking shelter support from the city as of July 2023, a significant rise from the approximately 47,000 people in the shelter system at the same time last year. Nearly 1 out of 3 people without stable housing in the downstate area are children, highlighting the widespread impact of this crisis. New York experienced a 30% increase in its unhoused population from 2022 to 2023, marking the largest increases in homelessness across the entire country. I want to repeat that again. It's marking the largest increases in homelessness across the United States. So the problem is, we already have tons of homelessness in New York City, and now we're bringing more people here. Of course, things are going to go wrong.
And we're following the migrant situation, right? Now, we trying to understand why they treating them better than y'all.
I don't know. They giving them everything.
They giving them benefits.
They giving you everything. They giving $9,000 a month. They giving
cell phones,
Everything.
iPads.
But what about y'all? Like, why are they doing this?
Some of them staying in hotel shelters. The shelter ain't feeding you. Nope. They ain't feeding you. They give you a place to stay.
Exactly.
You still gotta eat. You're human. You still gotta eat.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
I was getting $1,000 a month. You know how much I get now on my check? $400, man.
So you get $400. They get food.
They get $2,000.
They get $2,000 a month.
$2,000 for families.
Okay.
The families get $2,200. And I was shit in half to help them.
The migrant crisis in New York City is significantly impacting everyday New Yorkers, particularly those its effects on the city's shelter system, obviously in the housing market. Mayor Eric Adams' recent policy decision to limit shelter stays for single adult migrants to just 2 months is a response to the overwhelming demand on the city's shelters, which is already stretched beyond capacity.
No one seems to know exactly what's supposed to happen at this place. No one seems to know exactly where food is going to come from. No one seems to know if we are even allowed to help them officially.
Change is expected to lead to thousands of migrants facing eviction from shelters, which many have nowhere else to go, nowhere to sleep, nowhere to work, thus potentially increasing the number of individuals sleeping on the streets in one of the most expensive places in the world to be.
So because of the cold weather, there's been a lot of attention on migrant families who are being evicted from local shelters after 60 days.
As everyone knows, it has been freezing out here, and this new policy that evicts migrant families with children after 60 days has been in place for almost 2 weeks now. City council members and immigration advocates blasting Mayor Eric Adams and his administration for implementing a policy that evicts migrant families with children after 60 days. If these families cannot find their own housing within that time, they have to return to the Roosevelt Hotel and reapply for shelter. While a similar policy for single adult migrants has been in place for several months, this new recent policy change that now impacts migrant families with children has many, including the city council speaker, pushing back against the mayor.
So the city migrants influx has exacerbated New York's long-standing housing crisis, where middle-class residents find it challenging to afford living expenses. The median rent in Manhattan has reached record highs. Here in Brooklyn, it's about $3,000 per month to rent. $3,000 to rent a place. It's a lot of money, contributing to the fierce competition of housing. This is probably the last thing we need as New Yorkers. More people not able to afford rent, unable to have a place to live, because most New Yorkers could barely afford it themselves. It's expensive. This crisis has put a strain on efforts to reform the homeless shelter system. The city's unique right to shelter mandate, which guarantees immediate temporary housing to anyone in need, has come under pressure as the shelter system census has grown almost 2/3 due to the migrant surge. This growth in shelter demand not only strains the city's budget, but with the average annual cost to shelter one adult at $50,000, this diverts resources away from New York's native homeless population, whose needs are not being met amid this ongoing crisis. So all of the services have been pushed to the brink, whether it's social services, the housing, crime, everything to manage the situation is becoming more and more difficult to handle. Trying to figure out how to handle this migrant crisis. Well, unfortunately with Eric Adams, to combat this situation, he went with budget cuts.
Mayor Adams laying out budget cuts across every city agency, from libraries to schools and even the NYPD.
And no surprise, he's blaming the cuts on the migrant crisis.
City Hall officials announced they are enacting around $4 billion in budget cuts over the next year and a half that will cancel the hiring of new police officers, slash the education budget by $1 billion, and close libraries on Sundays. City officials say this is all due to the migrant crisis, and without additional federal aid, these cuts will only continue to grow.
These cuts are significant in the city's recent history, aimed to compensate for the financial strain without laying off employees. But this includes a hiring freeze. This financial strategy is a part of a broader plea for assistance from both state and federal governments to address the migrant crisis and other fiscal challenges the New York City faces. But the problem is cutting the police, cutting essential services significantly cause problems all over the place. Crime is still high. As much as people like to say it's getting lower, in New York City, it's still dangerous to live in certain areas. The trains are still a place where crime is constantly happening if you live in New York City and still paying all this rent and all this taxes to be here. And you won't receive the proper support because there's no money left. The purse strings are getting tight. Even if you are a migrant in New York City, you are facing a lot of problems, significant challenges, including overcrowded shelters, which there are some shelters that are pretty violent, where you have to worry about protecting your things, worrying about situations that's happening where you're not aware of. So not every shelter is a awesome place that's like a 5-star hotel. There's some violence that's going down in some of these shelters.
Safety concerns tonight for migrants after a man was stabbed to death at the migrant shelter on Randall's Island, and 2 other migrants were arrested in a separate incident.
Police say a man in his 20s was stabbed in the chest. He was taken to a hospital where he died. A male suspect is in police custody. Investigators say it started with a dispute inside the cafeteria at the shelter.
With the city's housing approximately 60,000 migrants and still receiving 300 to 500 new arrivals daily, things are just going to continue to be chaotic. Many people are critical of this policy. They express concerns that this policy can lead to increased street homelessness and complicate the process for migrants to obtain work authorizations and file asylum claims due to the fact that they're constantly changing their living situations. It's too unstable. You're not going to be able to get those things that you need to get done. It doesn't make sense for 100,000 people to come to the most expensive place to live, where opportunities like housing and job opportunities are pretty limited. The people who are living here are already suffering. It's really difficult to live in New York City. You have to have multiple streams of income. You have to be hustling all the time just to make ends meet. And to bring more people here without a significant plan, it's unfortunate that it looks like New York City will fall into deeper decline. And a question we have to be asked to a lot of New Yorkers is, should you stay here? Does it make sense to stay here with not just the situation with the migrants, but the crime has always been high? Things have been really terrible for a while because of the pandemic. New York City was like a pressure cooker. It was steaming up. Things were going to pop off eventually. But I believe that it was the pandemic that really put things in overdrive to make that pot explode. So that's where we are right now in this situation. And let's not even forget some of the investigations surrounding Mayor Eric Adams involving his 2021 campaign connections with the Turkish government and allegations of accepting illegal foreign donations. The FBI inquiry includes preferential treatment for developers in the fire system inspections and involvement of Adams' administration. Despite the ongoing investigations and the confiscation of his electronic devices, Adams has not been charged with any criminal activities. Not yet, anyway. I mean, at this point, Eric Adams has some pretty low approval numbers. Many of us thought that Eric Adams, being a former cop, they were able to fix a lot of the crime. That hasn't panned out. And I think he was too slow on figuring out that this was something that was going to happen, that New York was going to have to deal with this, and he should have had a better plan. And now he's stuck in this situation. So we'll see. What do you guys think about Eric Adams? Put in the comments below what Eric Adams should have done, or do you think Eric Adams is doing the best possible job that he can? Let me know. Put in the comments below your thoughts, and I'll see you guys in the next video.